Most people misunderstand Gemini at work from the very beginning. They look at Gemini's restlessness, their frequent changes of interest, their visible boredom with routine, and they jump to the easiest conclusion: laziness. But that assumption couldn't be further from the truth. Gemini is not lazy. Gemini is mentally overstimulated, emotionally underchallenged, and intellectually trapped in systems that move far slower than their mind. What looks like dissatisfaction is often the silent frustration of someone who thinks faster than the environment allows. From the outside, Gemini may appear inconsistent. One day they're excited, productive, full of ideas. The next, detached, quiet, mentally elsewhere. Managers interpret this as lack of commitment. Colleagues interpret it as immaturity. But inside Gemini's mind, something very different is happening. Their brain is constantly scanning for meaning, novelty, mental stimulation, and growth. The moment work becomes repetitive, predictable, or purely mechanical, Gemini's internal engine begins to shut down. Not because they don't care, but because their mind refuses to stagnate. Gemini doesn't work for the sake of working. They work for mental expansion. They crave movement, learning, and the sense that their intelligence is being used rather than wasted. When a job no longer feeds their curiosity, their motivation slowly erodes. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly. Gemini doesn't explode. They disengage. They start doing the minimum not out of laziness, but out of survival. Their mind goes elsewhere to find stimulation because the workplace no longer provides it. This is why Gemini often feels dissatisfied even in good jobs. Good salary, good team, good stability. On paper, everything looks fine, but internally, Gemini feels empty. They feel like something is missing, and that missing piece is mental challenge. Gemini needs to feel mentally alive. Without that, work becomes a cage, and the longer they stay inside that cage, the more restless they become. One of the most overlooked truths about Gemini is how early they mature mentally. Gemini often feels mentally older than their peers. Their curiosity pushes them to absorb information quickly, connect ideas intuitively, and see patterns others miss. This mental acceleration means Gemini outgrows roles faster than expected. A job that excites them at first can become unbearably boring within months. Not because Gemini is ungrateful, but because their mind has already moved on. This creates a painful internal conflict. Gemini knows society values stability, consistency, and long-term commitment. They try to force themselves to stay motivated. They tell themselves they should be grateful. They suppress their boredom. But the more they suppress it, the heavier it becomes. Gemini's dissatisfaction isn't dramatic. It's quiet, internal, and exhausting. Over time, this leads to mental burnout rather than physical exhaustion. Another reason Gemini struggles at work is the mismatch between how they think and how most workplaces function. Traditional work environments reward repetition, obedience, and slow, incremental progress. Gemini's mind thrives on speed, variation, and intellectual freedom. When forced into rigid structures, Gemini feels suffocated. Meetings feel pointless, tasks feel robotic, rules feel arbitrary. Their creativity has nowhere to go. And when Gemini can't express their intelligence, frustration turns inward. They begin questioning themselves. Why can't I just be satisfied like everyone else? What's wrong with me? Why do I always feel like I need more? These thoughts are common in Gemini's internal dialogue. They blame themselves for a problem that is largely environmental. The issue isn't Gemini's work ethic, it's the environment's inability to keep up with Gemini's mind. Gemini works best when they are mentally stimulated, not emotionally pressured. Fear-based motivation doesn't work on Gemini long-term. Deadlines, micromanagement, and constant supervision only increase their resistance. Gemini needs autonomy. They need trust. They need room to think, question, explore, and innovate. When given that freedom, Gemini can become one of the most productive and creative workers in any environment. But when that freedom is taken away, Gemini disengages mentally long before they quit physically. They show up, but their mind isn't there. This is often misunderstood as laziness, when in reality it's mental withdrawal. Gemini protects their mind by pulling it away from environments that feel stagnant or intellectually draining. There's also a deeper emotional layer to Gemini's dissatisfaction at work that few people talk about. Gemini doesn't just want to work, they want to understand why they're working. Purpose matters deeply to them, even if they don't always articulate it. If Gemini doesn't see meaning in what they do, motivation evaporates. Money alone is never enough. Titles don't impress them for long. Gemini wants to feel mentally and intellectually aligned with their work. This is why Gemini often explores multiple career paths throughout their life, not because they are unreliable, but because they are searching for mental alignment. They are looking for a place where their curiosity doesn't feel like a liability, but a strength, where asking questions is valued, where learning never stops, where evolution is encouraged instead of feared. Unfortunately, many workplaces punish curiosity. They reward conformity. Gemini notices this quickly, and once they realize growth has stopped, dissatisfaction sets in. They may stay longer than they should out of fear, responsibility, or external pressure, but internally they are already gone. Gemini's dissatisfaction is also connected to how quickly they absorb information. What others take years to master, Gemini often understands in months. This creates boredom, not arrogance. Gemini wants the next challenge, the next puzzle, the next layer of complexity. Without it, their mind starts drifting. They daydream. They mentally check out, not because they don't care, but because their brain refuses to idle. Another important truth is that Gemini is deeply affected by mental energy. If the workplace atmosphere feels heavy, pessimistic, or intellectually dull, Gemini absorbs that energy intensely. They become drained not from work itself, but from the mental stagnation surrounding them. Gemini needs conversation, exchange of ideas, and mental stimulation from others. Without it, they feel isolated even in crowded offices. This is why Gemini often thrives in dynamic, fast-paced environments where ideas flow freely. Roles involving communication, strategy, creativity, problem-solving, or learning suit them naturally. When Gemini feels mentally engaged, their work ethic surprises people. They can hyper-focus, multitask efficiently, and outperform expectations. But that version of Gemini only appears when their mind feels alive. The tragedy is that many Geminis never realize this. They internalize the label of inconsistent or lazy and carry it as guilt. They try to force themselves into environments that slowly drain them. Over time, dissatisfaction turns into self-doubt. Gemini starts questioning their own potential, when in reality, they were simply placed in the wrong system. Work dissatisfaction for Gemini is not a flaw. It's a signal that their mind needs growth, a signal that stagnation is damaging them, a signal that they are capable of more than their current environment allows. Ignoring that signal leads to burnout. Listening to it leads to transformation. And this is where the real shift begins, because once Gemini understands that their dissatisfaction is not laziness, not failure, and not immaturity, but misalignment, they stop blaming themselves. They start asking better questions. They begin redefining what work means to them. And most importantly, they stop shrinking their mind to fit systems that were never designed for them. In the next part, we'll go deeper into the psychological patterns behind Gemini's work dissatisfaction, the internal battles they face when staying too long in the wrong job, and what truly happens when Gemini finally finds an environment that matches their mental speed. This is only the beginning. What most people never see is the internal war Gemini fights every time they stay in a job that no longer stimulates them. On the surface, Gemini may look calm, functional, even successful, but internally, their mind is constantly negotiating between obligation and instinct. One part of them says, "Stay, be responsible, this is stable." The other part whispers, "You're dying in here." And that internal dialogue never truly stops. Gemini doesn't leave jobs impulsively as people assume. In fact, they often stay longer than they should. They overthink the consequences. They imagine future regret. They worry about disappointing others. Gemini understands responsibility deeply, but responsibility without meaning feels like a slow erosion of the soul. The longer they stay disconnected, the more their mental health begins to suffer. This is where dissatisfaction turns into mental exhaustion. Gemini's energy isn't drained by effort, it's drained by stagnation. When their days become predictable, when their tasks no longer require thinking, when their ideas are dismissed or ignored, their enthusiasm fades. They begin to feel trapped in repetition. And repetition is one of the most suffocating experiences for a Gemini mind. Over time, this dissatisfaction manifests in subtle but powerful ways. Gemini may procrastinate more, not because they can't work, but because starting feels pointless. They may scroll endlessly, seek distractions, or mentally escape into other interests. This isn't laziness, it's self-preservation. Their mind is trying to survive an environment that offers no intellectual oxygen. Another layer of Gemini's work dissatisfaction is their sensitivity to mental honesty. Gemini cannot tolerate hypocrisy for long. If a company claims to value creativity but punishes new ideas, Gemini notices. If leadership speaks about growth but fears change, Gemini sees through it immediately. This creates deep disillusionment. Once Gemini loses respect for the system, motivation collapses. Respect is everything to Gemini, not authority, respect. They need to respect the work, the people, and the vision. Without that, their mind disconnects. And once that disconnection happens, it's almost impossible to reverse. Gemini may still perform, but the spark is gone. They're no longer mentally invested. Gemini is also deeply affected by being underestimated. Because they often appear relaxed, humorous, or mentally scattered, people assume they lack depth. This couldn't be more wrong. Gemini is constantly processing information at high speed, connecting dots, and seeing multiple perspectives simultaneously. When their intelligence is dismissed, it creates quiet resentment. Not ego-driven resentment, but frustration at being unseen. This is why Gemini thrives in environments where dialogue is encouraged. They need to talk ideas out loud, bounce thoughts off others, explore possibilities without immediate judgment. When forced into silence or rigid hierarchies, Gemini shrinks. Their dissatisfaction grows not from workload, but from intellectual isolation. One of the most painful experiences for Gemini is realizing they've outgrown a role, but feeling guilty for wanting more. Society teaches us that dissatisfaction equals ingratitude. Gemini internalizes this message deeply. They tell themselves they should be content. They shame themselves for wanting change. But the truth is, Gemini's mind is designed for evolution. Growth isn't optional for them, it's essential. When Gemini ignores this need, the consequences are serious. Mental burnout, anxiety, loss of confidence, and even identity confusion can emerge. Gemini may start questioning who they are outside of work. They feel disconnected from themselves. The playful curiosity that once defined them becomes buried under obligation and routine. But something powerful happens when Gemini finally understands themselves. When they realize that satisfaction doesn't come from stability alone, but from mental alignment, when they stop forcing themselves into environments that don't fit, that's when everything changes. In the right environment, Gemini transforms completely. Their energy returns. Their focus sharpens. Their ideas flow effortlessly. They become innovative, fast-thinking, adaptable, and inspiring. Gemini doesn't just do the work, they elevate it. They see solutions others miss. They connect systems, people, and ideas with ease. Gemini excels when they are allowed to learn continuously, when growth is built into the role, when variety exists, when curiosity is rewarded instead of suppressed. This doesn't mean Gemini can't commit. It means they commit differently. They commit to evolution, not stagnation, to movement, not repetition. It's also important to understand that Gemini doesn't need chaos. They need flexibility. A common misconception is that Gemini hates structure. That's not true. They hate dead structure. They thrive in systems that adapt, evolve, and leave room for questioning. Give Gemini a flexible framework, and they will flourish within it. Another key shift for Gemini is redefining success. Traditional success metrics, titles, salary, status, lose meaning quickly if the mind feels bored. Gemini must learn to prioritize mental satisfaction alongside external achievement. When they do, their career choices become clearer. They stop chasing what looks good and start choosing what feels mentally right. This doesn't mean Gemini won't struggle. Doubt will still appear, fear will still whisper, but the difference is awareness. Once Gemini understands that dissatisfaction is a message, not a flaw, they stop fighting themselves. They start listening. And perhaps the most important realization of all is this: Gemini is not meant to stay the same forever. They are meant to evolve, reinvent, and expand. Careers that allow transformation will always suit them better than static paths. When Gemini honors this truth, work stops feeling like a prison and starts feeling like a playground for the mind. If you're a Gemini watching this and you've ever felt guilty for being dissatisfied at work, understand this: there is nothing wrong with you. Your mind simply needs more than most environments are willing to give. And once you stop apologizing for that, everything begins to shift. And if this perspective resonated with you, if you saw yourself in these words, make sure to support the channel. Like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe for more deep dives into Gemini psychology, and turn on notifications, because this journey of understanding yourself is only just beginning.